So welcome everyone. Thank you to Venture Cafe for hosting us. We very appreciate this. Venture Cafe connects innovators and entrepreneurs with high impact programming and events. Every Thursday, they host a free and inclusive community gathering. So you can always log onto their site and see what's going on. So again, thank you, Natalie from Venture Cafe. We appreciate it. My name is Nicholas Torres with Social Innovations Partners, and we are hosting this event because we focus on strategies to best engage our local government, corporations, and grant makers in the important changes social innovation will have on our region, bringing local nonprofits through a vetting process of the most viable new ideas and changed approaches to our region issues will be heard and addressed, and helping organizations to pivot due to the pandemic's impact on our current missions and their programs. So a couple logistics as you listen to us. To maximize your participation, please feel free to write your comments and questions into the chat box. If you have a particular question for an individual, it would be helpful to address them by name so they know that they are the one that you are looking to get a question, answer for that question. We will have a question and answer period for our keynote by Keith Leapart. You can also raise your virtual blue hand in the bottom right of your screen. And as time allows, we can call upon you to verbalize that question, if not in the chat box. Today, we will hear from our keynote, Keith Leapart, our panelists of foundations, and our social innovators on their presentations. During the presentations, each person is given 5 minutes to present, and then the panelists will have 5 minutes for feedback. Again, please use the chat box to ask individual questions to the presenters, or feel free to add your own comments or feedback. So now I'd like to introduce our keynote, Dr. Keith Leapart. Keith is the founder of Philanthropy, which is an impact fintech company that leverages data to simplify, track, and amplify giving for both organizations and individuals. With expertise in philanthropy, business technology, and banking, Philanthropist is reimagining and redefining everyday giving with its innovative solution. He is also the chairman of Replica Creative, board chair of Lenfin and Lenfist Foundation. So Keith, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you again for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Nick. I feel like on these Zoom presentations, everyone's so well behaved, and there's normally chatter in the room and everyone moving around, but you pretty much have everyone at their best behavior. This is the first time I've actually put on a collared shirt in about at least 6 or 7 weeks, so this is a big day for me. I've been walking around unshaved and probably in sweats and a t-shirt for most of the last 6 weeks. But we all know this is really a challenging time, and I first and foremost want to thank once again Nick for inviting me to speak today. Tracy and team at Venture Cafe and the Science Center that used to be my home. And I loved their tagline. At one time it was innovation needs an ecosystem, and so I was drawn to that. Anyone who knows me, I've always been driven to kind of purpose-driven work, and you'll probably hear today just a little bit about my upbringing and my professional career, kind of what got me here, why I do what I do. In many ways, you guys, I'm really excited to hear the presentations of our presenters here, because today is about them, not about kind of my remarks. My remarks are just formative, hopefully to encourage people to allow us to think deeper and bigger. I'm excited to give these remarks today to a great group of innovators. But if you're like me, you realize these are truly challenging times, and we have to be committed. We have to think bigger, about how we're going to solve some of society's problems, right? And whether, you choose to tackle education or criminal justice or, the environment or women's rights or racial discrimination or financial literacy or, whatever, you name it, whatever the issue is, there's a lot to do. And we always know Philadelphia being the poorest big city, and I hate that I've been saying that for so long, and it gets tougher to say it the longer it goes on because it hasn't changed yet. We have lots of work to do, and there's a great laboratory for change here, right? This is a place that needs it. It needs all the help that it can get. It's clear that government is not going to solve all of our problems, right? And I think that the smartest governments actually realize the importance of public and private sector partnerships and working with, nonprofit leaders and social change agents, really, and not worry about whose idea it is, but respect the idea. I think what oftentimes holds back cities and leaders in general is we get way too concerned about whose idea it is versus getting behind the big idea and making sure that it happens. For me, I feel like I'm kind of like preaching to the preachers. You guys are the experts here, and I play in the space. I would say I believe Wes from the Lynfest Foundation, our executive director, is here. He is the one that's boots on the ground every day. I've been very fortunate to work alongside in partnership with him and the rest of our board in doing the work. So, my remarks do not consider me an expert in any way, shape, or form. I'm just, like most of you, really concerned about what's happening in our environment and what's happening in our culture. And the sad part is, things don't seem to be getting better. You look at the impact of things like a pandemic. And so as I believe many of you know, I have a healthcare background as well. I'm trained, I'm a licensed physician. And you see the stress on the healthcare system and the way, a pandemic is totally disrupting our entire lives. It's changing the way we look at education. It's changing the way we actually interact with each other. It's changing the practice of medicine in general, right? I mean, if you're a family practitioner, as a physician, I think one of the most powerful things that we have is the human touch and to be able to be in the presence of a patient. And now where things are in telemedicine, and to me, we miss out on the connections that bring us together. So for sure, we need to continue to really think big and focus on big ideas. I also would say we have to challenge ourselves to think about what the next 5, 10, 20 years will look like from an economic standpoint. If you look at the city and look at the country, and statistics show that 40% of Americans cannot make a $400 emergency purchase in times of crisis, right? That is pretty daunting. Technology has disrupted our ecosystem so much that people in the technology space are preparing for concepts like universal basic income, which was, of course, the platform of Andrew Yang, who was running for president. And of course, we know he comes from technology. And I had the fortune of, through my work in philanthropy, actually meeting Andrew Yang long before he ran for office, and him actually calling me about 4 years ago, right after the last presidential election, and just randomly saying, Keith, I'm thinking about running for president. And it was the weirdest thing. And I was really pumped for him because it was a big idea. He was a young guy, seemed like a great guy. I didn't know him well, but he was respectful enough to actually get my opinion on what I thought. I was like, definitely do it. But he introduced the concept to me of universal basic income, right? And we all know that universal basic income, if you're not familiar, but universal basic income is the concept that, at some point, most Americans will need support. At some point, most Americans will need support. So that $1,200 stimulus check was like a down payment on the concept of universal basic income, because of the fact, and he was coming from a technology background, realizing that technology over the next, 20 plus years, 5, 10, maybe even sooner, will disrupt the workforce so dramatically that, most Americans will receive a check each month just to live, right? It's a sad concept. It's a sad commentary on society, but literally was, the platform that he ran on, what became part of his major piece of his platform, but he was looking at it from a technology perspective. So people in other rooms are talking about the fact that things are going to be massively disrupted in the future, and we have to do our part to prepare. And the ideas are going to come from this audience here, this group. It is really exciting that Nick has put this together so many years ago, thinking about how do you get ideas to market, how do you get ideas to scale, how can we do this. And so this is a necessary part of what we need in a region, and more importantly, the time is now to do it. So once again, I was very fortunate to have a life-changing encounter some years ago with Jerry Lynfest, who was our region's greatest philanthropist, arguably our region's greatest philanthropist. But, I met him while in medical school and, operating a commercial cleaning business. And we connected around our kind of common bond to help people. And when I look back over my life, I've been very fortunate. I've done a lot of different things, and had some success. But I think one of the greatest successes I've had to date was when I received a call from Jerry, and this was in 2011, and he asked me to join the board of directors of the Lymphest Foundation. He wanted me to he asked me to join the board and said, Keith, I actually want you to lead our strategic planning process as we rethink the foundation as a whole, what our focus is. He said, I have my name on enough buildings. I need to figure out how to actually help people. And so, I felt like I could have, when I got that call, I could have died and went to heaven. And then a year later, he asked me, he then said, hey, I want to step down and I want you to succeed me as chairman. It was a big ask, but a big responsibility. And I also know that Jerry was very, very astute. He knew the symbolism of asking, a young African-American, I was young at that point, I'm no longer young, a young African-American male from the city of Philadelphia who, it wasn't always my station in life to be in philanthropy. I've been blessed to have experienced, I'd say, all sides of the economic spectrum. I grew up in the city of Philadelphia as a part of the working poor, in a neighborhood that was infested by drugs in the height of the crack epidemic in the 80s, right? And the first time I can recall making consistent money was as a runner in the neighborhood. And they would take, and I was 9 or 10 years old, and they would tell kids like me, hey, you want to make $1? Go take this over here and drop it off down the street. And I wasn't a bad kid. It turned out okay, but the environments that lots of kids are in, this is just the exposure that you get. You're born into these conditions. I had a great mother. I was in a single parent home, but I also I was able to leave the house, so there was influences outside. But my mother really early on placed an extreme value on education and the value of education, and she did whatever she could to make sure that both of our children had the best options as it related to education. We could not afford private school. And so I think at that time, we were participants in what many would consider a socially innovative program at the time, and that was desegregation. That was a busing program in the city of Philadelphia that took kids from minority neighborhoods and bused them to schools and majority neighborhoods. And I can say as a young man growing up, I was the only one from my neighborhood who was on the bus out to the Northeast. And so there was quite the challenges both ways. When I got to school, there was a challenge, right? Kids looking at me like, oh, what are you doing here? And then when I got home, people in the neighborhood, my friends looking at me like, where were you at? So it was quite the challenge, but it was very, very important for my mother to take that step. And then for my middle school years, I also felt like I was part of another kind of social experiment, and that was a school called Amy 2, and it was called Alternative Middle Years. And some of you may be familiar. It was actually started by some center city parents who couldn't get their kids into Greenfield at the time, started this school called Amy Alternative Middle Years. So it was kind of like a charter model before charters, right? It was a smaller school, smaller classroom, really concerned parents. Kids came from all over the cities to get into the school. When I went there, it was at 13th and Susquehanna, right down the street from Temple in North Philadelphia. I was on the subway, and I think back to that, I have a 13-year-old right now, and I could never think of my son on the subway every day for school. I was on the subway in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, catching the train in North Philadelphia, and kids were coming from South Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, all parts of the city. But it was a great, once again, the foundation was education. It was a great experience. It propelled me onto Central High School, where I went for high school, which of course has a great tradition and has led, it was my educational foundation. I always say that. And, despite my formative years kind of being pre-internet and pre-social media, I realized that, early on that I might not have been dealt the best hand. Growing up in poverty, realizing that where I was living was probably not the best place to live. It was, I was very happy. We had lots of fun as kids. We got in lots of trouble. There was never not a time there wasn't something to do. But I realized early on that there was much more. And and for me, it really drove my inner passion to make a difference. I wanted early on to do better than, you know, my parents, which they pushed me, and of course they wanted for me. And you know, my dream early on was to become a physician, and largely because at the age of 5, when I was, you know, figuring out what I wanted to be, I knew what a doctor was, a lawyer was, a teacher was, a policeman, and a fireman. And you know, all due respect to our great law student on here, I was like, oh, I don't want to be a lawyer. But I, you know, I was, and I, you know, I was, of course, everybody wants to be a fireman or a policeman when you're young. And then, you know, decided that, hey, medicine was for me because it filled 2 buckets for me: make money and help people, right? I've always had one central theme to everything I do, and that's social innovators. And as you guys go through this, there's nothing wrong with making money. It was part of this as being social innovators and social entrepreneurs is to make money, but you got to add the other part is being positioned to help people, right? You know, my blueprint was largely Jerry's blueprint, who, you know, made a lot of money and gave a lot of money away, and literally, you know, his dream and was to die broke. Unfortunately, he was unable to do it. I remember, you know, sitting at his bedside, you know, as he's getting close to his death, and him literally looking at me in frustration and said, "It's really hard to give it away," right? And you know, you think of he made a lot of money and pushed it back out and tried as hard as he could. And that's been my blueprint. So my dream to become a physician was all about helping people, right? I thought I was going to be able to do that in healthcare. But when I got to the place of finishing up my residency at Jefferson, you know, I realized a lot of people in the neighborhood I came from that I wanted to help didn't even have healthcare. So this was before Obamacare or Romney Care or whatever care you call it. Most people didn't have healthcare that I knew. And so, you know, I decided that, well, maybe that's not going to be my path. Maybe I can figure out another way to help people or help more people. And I've always felt like, you know, there are kind of, once again, 2 ways to kind of make change: the public or the private sector. So I said, oh, well, why not just run for Congress, right? And this was in 2007. And so, you know, I considered a run for Congress. I opened up an exploratory committee. I just didn't realize I was running against Bob Brady. I picked out his congressional district because I lived in it. And, you know, if you know anything about Philadelphia politics, it's probably not the place to start. And so for multiple reasons at the time, I decided it wasn't the right choice for me. But what it did was, you know, that decision there really reconnected me with Jerry at the time. And so, you know, once again, I had met Jerry while in medical school. I was cleaning offices. I graduated from medical school. I went on to do my residency. And when I decided that I was going to run for Congress, you know, I went to him and asked him, would he support me? And, you know, he had no clue. He had no personal relationship with Bob Brady, wasn't in the political fray. He said, I'd be glad to support you, be happy to support you. And as I was, you know, getting up excited in glee, that's when he sat down with me and said, you know, Keith, but I have some things I want you to help me with. And, you know, he said, I want you to help me help people, right? And so from that point on, we began to work together. Once again, I decided not to run. I transitioned as an executive on loan from the Linfest Foundation to the city of Philadelphia. It was the incoming mayor, Mayor Nutter at the time. He had a big initiative on reentry. And so I became a liaison between the mayor's office of reentry and the business community. And it was a wild idea that, hey, people who are on drugs, who are commit offenses or a crime, their lives shouldn't be thrown away, that they should have the ability to have a second chance, should be able to get back into the workforce. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I saw and I realized, and it was very frustrating because, you know, Jerry knew all of the players. So he would set the room. We would have meetings with, you probably name every business leader. Many of them are still empowered here. And this was 12 years ago, at least, right? This was, you know, some time ago. And Jerry would set up these meetings with a bunch of business leaders, and we'd talk about the importance of second chances. You know, Philadelphia had the highest, we're once again the highest for something, the highest incarceration rate in the country for any big city. We no longer have that. I can say we moved past that. We had over 200,000 people within the city limits with criminal histories. You can imagine what that does to your tax base if they're no longer allowed to work. If you work I worked in a hospital recently at the time, and you know, they couldn't even pass the tray. Couldn't work in environmental services. You couldn't pass the tray to a patient if you had a criminal history. And so, you know, we really were focusing on looking at that. That led to a broader look at just criminal justice reform because the system was so broken. You look at the disproportionate incarceration and criminalization of activity like drug usage and drug sales. It was in the urban environments, you were way more likely to be prosecuted for drug usage than you were if you lived in the suburban environments. The prosecution, we all know the way the crack versus cocaine disparity was. You could have 10 times more powder cocaine and get a tenth of the sentence that you would of someone who had crack cocaine, right? And so all these things were led me to being really, really frustrated. And so out of frustration of, saying that, hey, the business community right now is not getting it, saying, because they still didn't want to hire anybody, they would say, Keith, this is really important, but, we're still not going to, look to hire any ex-offenders at the time. Once again, it's 12 years ago. Things have moved quite a bit since then. So I decided, well, F it, I'm going to buy a business and begin to hire people. So I bought a business back in 2008, a company called Replica Creative, which I still own and operate. It's been around for now 40 years. I've been involved, 2009 for the last 10 or 11 years. And the first hire was someone who came out of prison, who recently came out of prison, who's still with me today. And so, I've always tried to use my platform, as a way to empower people and be supportive of others. And now today, as as a chair of the Linfest Foundation, we have lots of questions that we need to answer in the new normal, right? I mean, this is the new normal, right? What should our priorities be in the new normal? Our foundation was always focused on youth development, was always focusing on, meeting young people at critical kind of transition points in their lives, right? So, we had three kind of major priorities coming out of that strategic planning process. It was early literacy, right? So early childhood education. It was out of school time, right? What kids do when they're out of school, because they spend most of their time outside of schools. Schools have always been a safe haven. You think about what's happening now where, unfortunately kids are at home and they're missing the safe haven of the school environment, the camaraderie there and the structure there. And so we were focusing on the out of school time space in middle school years. And then, the last transition was really about career pathways, realizing that every kid isn't going to go to college. Every kid may not need to go to college, but can we teach them skills that will allow them to, get into the workforce? And, a few years ago, it was more, advanced manufacturing. Today, it's, coding, right? And these things like that. And so those were our priorities. And I'm happy to say, based upon that, we saw some shifts in the marketplace. We saw a ton of attention go into early childhood education, pre-K for PA, as well as the local city effort. We were early funders in both of those. And as we saw resources shift there, we said, hey, we can now shift our resources to things that are a little bit, that have bigger gaps. And one of the bigger gaps is still out of school time for kids, right? This was a space that, it's hard. And I get from a funder's perspective, because we question it all the time. Why do we support out of school time programs that it's really hard to measure the impact, right? It's really one of the most difficult things to do. But we've always, looked at it by a couple guiding principles. Are there positive, caring adults there, right, that are going to care for the kids? And are they learning something constructive? And so, which led us to supporting those programs. But things have changed. And Wes and I talk quite frequently now and say, what does our new normal look like? We are also in a different place of, we're going out of business in 2.5 years. We're designed to sunset. So the foundation as a whole will be, there will be no Linfest Foundation in 3 years. And Wes will correct me if it's sooner than that. 2.5 to 3 years, but we were designed to sunset. Jerry never wanted anything in perpetuity, and he always believed that, he read a book early on about philanthropy, and he said, he didn't want anything in perpetuity because he believed that, after a couple generations, it went far askew with the founder's intent. So we're designed to sunset. So how do we leave thoughtfully? How do we leave an environment that we've been an aggressive funder and an out of school time space without, the city being neglected? So we're thinking about that. What types of programs will be effective now as people practice kind of physical distancing measures? The programs that we used to support where, kids came together and they were all sitting in a room and you had, people on site. That hasn't been happening. How do we make decisions, right? So this is something there, where not only do we need socially innovative leaders to come up with good ideas, but we also need, people in philanthropy to think creatively and say, hey, those ideas make sense. They're, take some bets on them and realize that, what we used to be able to do, we can't do anymore. And then for me, what's really important is how do we make sure that children in Philadelphia who, have limited access to opportunity can continue to get certain opportunities, right? We are struggling. We are struggling here as a city around access to the internet. We all know the digital divide. We've done a great job of at least getting devices in people's hands, or the ability for young people to get devices. But the factors around internet, and then also overstressed parenting. If you are, think about being the child of an essential worker, and an essential worker these days are probably what they're calling the essential workers, outside of the doctors and nurses and others in healthcare that they refer to as essential. Think of the security guards and all the people that help us in the supermarkets, and all those who are not getting paid as much, who have to go to work, who have children at home, who you can't be there whether you want to or not to tell to do your homework. So you have quite an issue of kids not checking in and connecting and getting their work done. So this is a critical time. This is uber important for us to make sure that we're thinking big, that we are being placing big bets, that we are thinking about how people will function. This is the time to pivot. We've heard pivot in all of our lives, and probably some of us looking at professional careers, looking at a pivot. I've been pivot in my business as well. And so for me, as the foundation looks to sunset, I have been thinking about what does my next chapter in philanthropy look like. And Nick mentioned that that I started a company called Philanthropy, and it's philanthropy with an I, and we're really focusing on powering kind of individual givers. We have in our platform, we've democratized donor advised funds as a kind of next generation employee benefit for employers to be able to rethink the way they've done kind of corporate philanthropy, which has been really top down, where the CEO decides that these are the causes that the organization should support, but you have young people and just people, your employees in general, that have their personal passions, and we've given them a platform to allow them to support their employees, who then are able to support their personal passions, right? So similar to a 401k for philanthropy, but it's tax deductible for the employees to contribute into what we call these impact accounts. We've also, in real time, around COVID, we've set up for employers employee assistance funds, because philanthropy begins at home. Yes, employers are concerned about what they're doing in the community, but right now they're really concerned about how their employees are going to make it. And so we've made it easy and streamlined for employers to assist their employees in times of crisis. And these funds are really interesting. Typically, employers seed them, but over time, 78% of the funds actually comes from employees via payroll deduction, supporting other employees, right? Building that sense of community. And so, I'm in it for the long haul. As you will see, as things change, and I'm, as the foundation transitions and no longer serving in that capacity, I still remain very committed to the city of Philadelphia and to thinking about ways to, help the next generation, and just help people in general. I mean, we should all be thinking about, measuring our success. Yes, we want to make money. We need to make money. It's an important part of the American way and our ecosystem, but we also should be judging ourselves on how many people at the end of the day that we've helped. How many people have we been able to help? How many people have we been able to empower? And that's, what I will ultimately judge my success on. So I could talk until I'm blue in the face, but as I said, I know the day isn't about me, and you guys have been very patient, and I'm really looking forward to the presentations from our presenters today. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Keith. I think we're going to just, Patrick, I'm going to give you the one question and then we'll move on just to keep things moving. So Patrick, you want to answer your question? So as he unmutes, I think we'll go for it. So again, Keith, I think we'll continue the conversation in the chat box, but thank you for that story. I have questions of my own, but just because it's a strict timeline, I'm going to kind of move on to our next one. So let me turn it over to our panelists, and Nat, for the board member of the Hamilton Family Charitable Trust. Let me turn it over to you to do your introduction.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nat Hamilton from the Hamilton Family. Sorry, let me restart. I am Nat Hamilton. I've been involved in the nonprofit sector since 2006, and am currently sitting on 5 nonprofit boards. 2 of these are of charitable purpose: the Hamilton Family Foundation, and which was started in the mid-90s, and the Hamilton Family Charitable Trust, which just recently started in 2018. The other 3 boards is University of the Arts, small art school in downtown Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia Zoo, the oldest zoo in America. And then a small boarding school in Connecticut, Rectory School, that serves 6th to 9th graders. It's a great little place. The 2 family foundations have similar missions, very focused on education and improving lives. The board has 14 board members, and the large majority of them are family, but covering 2 different generations. When looking at the trust, the bylaws for the charitable trust, 75% of it has to go to education in Philadelphia. So very excited about that. It was a very strong passion for the trust founder, who believed the fastest way out of poverty is education. During these unprecedented times, our executive director, Nancy Wingo, reached out to our grant recipients, and many of whom we've helped start and some who we've helped support for decades, to discuss their actions and how we could help. Then we divided the grant recipients into 3 categories of impact: food, healthcare, and another one, just a random. The board gathered and discussed where we should shift our funds, why. Many board members chambered different avenues to help with the pandemic, such as hospital programs, food banks, and certain community needs within their areas. We were able to shift these fundings, and it was amazing to hear a lot of these stories of these small nonprofits able to pivot to the pandemic from teaching education to then supplying food. We were very fortunate and able to help and nimble enough to pivot and supply these funds. So thank you, everybody, my fellow philanthropists, and the presenters for having me today.
Thanks, Nat. We look forward to hearing your comments on the pitches. So thank you. Alexandra, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Alexandra Fraser, the Executive Director of the Valentine Foundation. We came into existence in 1985. Our mission is to fund social change for women and girls in the greater Philadelphia area. We make grants to women and girls organizations, and then we have 2 other ways that we impact in the community. One is we started a leadership fund for women working in nonprofits to get nonprofit education. And the other piece, which is the newest part for us, is that we have committed 10% of our endowment towards mission-aligned investments. And so our response to COVID-15, we've done 2 things. We're in the midst of doing a third, but the first thing that we did was contact all our grantees and tell them that whatever's left of the grant money that we've given them, you can just use it as general operating. Don't even worry about the program, because so many things changed when people couldn't do things face to face, and there were emergencies that hadn't been anticipated pre-COVID-19. The second thing was that we made a loan to the Women's Opportunity Resource Center, which is an organization that is allowed to give away the PPP money, and most of their constituents are minority-owned businesses, a lot of women-owned businesses in Philadelphia, and they had a need of like $2 million, but they only had, they needed another $1 million. They were allowed to give those loans away. These people had been approved, but Women's Opportunity Resource Center didn't have the money to give. So we made a no interest loan to the Women's Opportunity Resource Center, and a bunch of other foundations did that as well, so that they were able to get the money directly into the hands of the minority and women-owned small businesses, rather than having to wait longer. So those are the things that we've done. The third thing is that we're just exploring other ways of making investments in the community that are responsive to COVID-19. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Alexandra. Now, Elizabeth, who's the president of Untours Foundation, would you like to go?
Great. Our foundation was born out of the profits of Untours, a unique travel company and also the world's first B Corporation. And we've since inherited Untours, so it's a unique model of a nonprofit owning a for-profit. We use our entire modest endowment to invest in world-enhancing green businesses that model the economy and the world we want to see, that model caring for the earth and her inhabitants. So for example, we were the first investor in Wash Cycle Laundry, and proud of that. And we invest internationally. We're invested, for example, in a company called Tonlay in Cambodia. It's an answer to fast fashion. It's paying its employees 3 times more what the average person earns in that industry, and they're required to work half the hours. And interestingly, they make all of their clothes out of remnants of fabric left over from other factories. At the prompting of Judy Wicks, we made our hometown of Media the first fair trade town in the US. 43 towns and cities have followed, including Philadelphia, Chicago, and San Francisco. And because our entire endowment for our 30-year history has been invested in ways that match our mission through this low interest loan fund, we're 100% mission aligned, and we spend some of our time evangelizing to other foundations to align their endowments with their missions. So a shout out to the Valentine Foundation for doing just that, and a shout out to the Lenfest Foundation for the spend down and for sunsetting and for not getting hung up on perpetuity and for using the capital for good and for your mission. So happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and welcome. Mindy, who is the president of Nelson Foundation, would you like to go?
Sure. Hello, thank you for having me here today. My name is Mindy Aldridge, and I'm the president of the Nelson Foundation. I've been involved with the foundation since 2006 and the president since 2011. The Nelson Foundation, as a couple of the others, was founded in the mid-80s, 1984, as an independent foundation with a mission to expand opportunities for children and youth so that they become responsible, productive, and engaged members of their communities. Specifically, the foundation looks to invest in organizations that improve the academic, character, and leadership development of children and youth. The foundation gives grants regionally in Philadelphia, Chester, Delaware, and Montgomery counties. Grantee organizations are relatively small. In 2019, the average budget size of our grantees was $730,000. So we definitely look to smaller size organizations. There are really 2 grant programs. There's a core grant program, which is open. All grants are awarded for 2 years, and nearly 100% of grant making is general operating. We also have a capacity building grant program that is by invitation only and is available to current grantee partners. We've also in recent years been doing more, spending more time, more energy, additional funds in supporting our grantee partners beyond the grants. So including opportunities to attend special seminars, trainings, convenings on topics of interest, and gatherings of peers. COVID-19 has obviously upended a lot of this programming work for us this year. We've been very active with COVID-19. I wish we were meeting in another 10 days when we have our next board meeting, but our board acted very quickly, and we were one of the initial funders of the PHL COVID fund. We also, by the end of March, had paid all grant installments that were due through December of 2020, and our grant making cycle, we moved up 3 months. Everyone had just completed their applications right before COVID-19 hit. And so we processed those as fast as we could and had those out at the beginning of April. We've also been communicating on a regular basis with our grantees. So I would say on average every 2 weeks. And I think that's been really helpful to keep the lines of communication open. We've also been on the phone and on email a lot with individual grantees. And there are 4 additional proposals that will be discussed and hopefully approved by the board in 10 days. So that's it from the Nelson Foundation.
Thank you, Mindy. And our last panelist is Evan, from Senior Program Specialist from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation. Evan?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Evan Cantiello. I'm the Senior Program Specialist at the Independence Blue Cross Foundation. Prior to the foundation, I spent 10 years in the nonprofit sector building and designing programs for health and homelessness across the U.S. Since 2011, the Independence Blue Cross Foundation has, on average, every year invested about $5 million into the community. And that's been through historically 4 signature programs. We call them programs, but they're really focus areas. And as we look at our outcomes, it's more of an administrative thing to call them signature programs at this point. But the first is the Blue Safety Net program, supporting health centers throughout the region. Our focus area is the 5-county region of southeastern Pennsylvania. We provide general operating funds for those health centers who are delivering care for uninsured or underinsured individuals through FQHC models, free clinic models, or other various health center models. We also have our nursing scholarship program that exists to bolster the healthcare workforce. We know there is a shortage of healthcare workers, and there is no way to describe that accurately right now in our current environment to communicate the full breadth of how our healthcare workforce needs support. But that exists to fund scholarships for nurses in the region. We also have our Addressing Health Priorities program, which has been a cycling health issue of utmost importance to our region. So for the past 3 years, we've been focused on addressing the opioid crisis in our region. We've done that through providing grants for organizations that are providing services for prevention and education, that are providing treatment, as well as supports for families who have been impacted by the opioid epidemic. We've also commissioned research out of Bucks County in partnership with PHMC to evaluate effective warm handoff programs in the region, which is when an individual presents in the ER presenting with an overdose, there is a Pennsylvania mandate that says an individual with lived experience, a certified recovery specialist, should intervene, take them by the hand to treatment. That's why it's called a warm handoff. And we learned through that study that that was not a standard procedure. It was a mandate that did not have much teeth to it. So we helped to get over $500,000 of local state funds directed to help support warm handoff programs in the region. Also part of that, our STOP program, which is supporting treatment and overdose prevention, is our Someone You Know initiative, which is a multimedia campaign that's destigmatizing the issue of substance use disorder in our region. So we've got some very brave folks who are sharing their individual personal stories and how they've been impacted by the opioid epidemic. This is individuals who themselves are in recovery, family members who have lost loved ones as a result of an overdose, or family members who are supporting people who have yet to achieve recovery themselves. And then lastly, our most recent program, which we worked closely with Nick on to develop some content and be a convener in the region to help support nonprofits who are coming up with new ideas, is our Community Innovation Grant Program. That launched a year and a half ago, and the purpose was to provide seed funding for new ideas that were not evidence-based. We know foundations like to see evidence-based programs. We also know that there is an incredible amount of work that comes before that process, and we wanted to be a part of that, helping to fund new ideas in our region. So happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. So now we're going to flip over to our presentations, which I think is the most exciting part of this. And to everybody on who's participating, the panelists will be giving verbal feedback, but we'd love for you to give written feedback via the chat box. And so I'm sure they'd all invite all types of feedback on their ideas and what you think about them. So I'd first like to introduce Mary Beth Thomas and Megan Mink from Momentum Co-working and Kids. And they're presenting on a community of care, providing an innovative solutions for working families. So Mary Beth and Megan.
Well, my name is Mary Beth Thomas, the co-founder of Momentum Co-working and Kids Club. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I'm co-presenting with Momentum's director, Megan Mink. I'm a mom of 3, a pediatric occupational therapist, and a full-time professor. Back in 2016, I was trying to juggle being a working parent and finding affordable after-school care for my 3 kids. The existing options did not meet my needs in terms of affordability and flexibility. I started to brainstorm to figure out a better way. I connected with Jackie Maniscalco, who had a similar problem with a need for workspace with on-site childcare for her infant. We merged the 2 ideas, and Momentum Co-working and Kids Club was born in January of 2018. Both programs have grown and developed exponentially. As a result, we have an amazing community of kids, parents, and families. The continuum of care and community that we have created doesn't sound groundbreaking, but it is truly innovative, and the word has spread. We do not typically seek the spotlight, but we have embraced the opportunity to affect change and to disrupt the childcare industry with our innovative solutions. Having the opportunity to talk about Momentum live on national TV and hearing the segment on NPR about our grassroots approach were exhilarating highlights. And we are extremely grateful to speak to all of you today about this exciting topic. Momentum's customers have had glowing feedback about our programs. Additional families are in great need of our enriching, flexible programs. We are poised to hit the ground running when the stay-at-home order is lifted. It is projected that at least 30% of people who are working in office spaces will be working remotely for the foreseeable future. And it is also estimated that 4.5 million childcare slots will be lost permanently. Families need flexible options and deserve a choice about what to put back in their families' lives. In terms of our financial model, we have extremely low overhead, and we provide our programs in community spaces. We have revenue streams from recurring monthly fees, but with additional resources, we could do more, and our programs could reach more families. With additional financial support, we could develop a playbook as a springboard to consultation and partnerships. We could purchase a van, which would facilitate immediate expansion to 3 additional elementary schools and to a local middle school. We could fund the hiring of direct support professionals to facilitate inclusion of kids with special needs. We could fund a consultant to provide supervision to full-time interns so that we could provide more specialized programming for participants with special needs, caregiver child playgroups, and parental support groups. Most exciting of all, Momentum has the game-changing opportunity to co-locate our programs within a new state-of-the-art public library with an on-site cafe, outdoor space, maker space, and a business incubator. The possibilities are limitless in terms of providing meaningful support to working families.
Megan Mank. I am a birth and postpartum doula and the director of Momentum Co-working Kids Club. Momentum walks with families and children from birth through adolescence. Our model of innovation is foundational and what differentiates us. We pride ourselves on making a place where all families are welcomed and embraced. We have created a flexible after-school and camp program where kids can be kids, a place where kids can develop their identity, explore, create, all in an environment where they feel safe and comfortable to be themselves. At our co-working with Childcare location, we afford parents the ability to have lunch on site with their children, ask those hard parenting questions, and have a quiet workplace near their little ones. Momentum is surrounding their families with a village of support. Momentum is so strong and unique because of our team. We have a passion for loving and walking alongside families. Our team has business women, an occupational therapist, certified teachers, mothers, a doula, nutritionists, students, and innovative thinkers. Momentum stimulates local business development. Collaboration with businesses serves our current families while bringing new potential members through our doors. We offer parenting seminars, networking lunches, mindfulness for mama, and music classes, and we routinely connect with our families to gain insight into their needs and interests. Now, these photos definitely can't say, here is just a glimpse. We have 4 sets of twins in our weekly program. Our families come from a variety of religious and cultural backgrounds. There are multilingual families and single and dual parent households. And these families have placed a high value on the supportive environment and everyone is celebrated. We are excited to take bold steps on our mission to grow families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth and Megan. So Nat, you want to turn it over to you for feedback?
Love the model, love the after school. After school is essential. Great way connecting businesses and the community and the nonprofit. I love that. Yeah, that's all I got. I'll one off you. Thank you.
Great. Alexandra?
This sounds amazing to me. I really like the fact that you're including the rest of the community and it's not just childcare in a spot, that you've become a community. And if I still have little kids, I might do this. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Alexandra. Elizabeth?
Always takes me a minute to unmute. This is a great program, and this is really expanded since I heard your pitch at the Social Innovation Awards and got to meet one of you at least. I couldn't tell if your staff is diverse. I'm just coming at, I mean, I just only have good things to say, so, but let me just dig down a little bit. I couldn't see if the staff was diverse. And I'd love to see you promote like how environmentally sound you are and sort of a step above the average after school program or care for kids. I always look for that. And when I had a child in daycare, I worried about that when they used harsh cleansers and that sort of thing. But that sort of thing could differentiate you, including having a garden, and maybe you do, maybe you have all that, have organic food for the kids. But it's really a great idea. And one of the things I think you did really well was to in light of COVID-19.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Mindy?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I kind of echo all of the positive things that I heard from the prior panelists. I was not familiar with your program until this pitch. So, I was kind of, some things I didn't hear that would have been helpful was, you had talked about at the beginning the affordability piece and the flexibility, and I think it would have helped me to hear a little bit more concretely about those things, and how it might be differentiated from other options. But it sounds great. Maybe for my grandkids someday.
Thanks, Mindy. Evan?
Great presentation, great idea. I was over here texting my wife about it. And I'm sure you saw my little one buzzing around, grabbing things off the desk. Unique environment now for sure, but definitely relevant. Yeah, I echo what Miss Aldridge said regarding some of the pricing and a little bit more of the how and how accessible that winds up being. I can intuit the tactical and how important it is. I think maybe for a little bit more universal presentation, giving us a quick dive into the how and tactical of what the need is and then how that need gets met. You got into some of it, and it sounds like a van would certainly help build capacity, but I'm left wondering what specifically about the van makes the reach a little bit farther, but really exciting stuff.
Thanks, Evan. And Keith, you get to finish it off.
I feel like Simon Cowell here. I'm last. I'm supposed to be the mean one. No, but I actually thought it was great as well. I love the idea. Co-working spaces are, as you know, are really popular. This is very, very different that, allows you to keep your kids as close as you want. Maybe you don't want them as close, but allows you to keep them close when you need to. I'm definitely interested in the pricing model around it and, the fee structure, because I think if anyone's ever sent their kid to daycare, that's expensive enough. So, how does it work with daycare and, your business and as well as the logistics around or feedback from parents, does it become such an emotional pull when your kid's right next door, or do you have that kid that only wants mama and is going to be knocking on the door to try to get to you? So logistically, how does that work? And then the last thing, I always feel like dads gets left out of everything. So I'm sure you've heard that before, but we need a co-working space too for dads.
Thanks, Keith. And again, thank you, Mary Beth and Megan. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tyler Burrell, who's going to present on mental health services with students in mind, reducing suicide rates for college students. Tyler?
Great, thanks, Nick. Let me just share this screen. Where do I get to it? All right, let's pull this up. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tyler Burrell. I'm a law student at the University of Pennsylvania Law School in my final year. I developed in mind a concept that is technology medicine for mental health, and it's a concept for higher education institutes. I'm looking for an organization or individual to adopt and develop the in mind concept and take it to market. It is clear that the status quo of mental health isn't working in higher education, and it's time for innovative change. The problem is clear and convincing. Suicidal thoughts and severe depression has doubled over the last decade in higher education. For example, in Rowan University, where I earned my undergraduate degree, 3 students committed suicide during the fall 2019 semester. At the University of Pennsylvania, in a 6-year period, 14 students committed suicide. This can be accredited to the fact that there's a treatment backlog and overburden on the school services. In addition, students are adverse to campus services, and students only engage with these services during the onset of a crisis. The good news is we don't have to look far for innovative solutions to manage this mental health crisis. We just have to look to Zimbabwe, home of the Zimbabwe Friendship Bench. The Friendship Bench provides talk therapy to the community via trained and supervised lay healthcare workers. In other words, 400 grandmothers volunteering their time for the community. A study of this model found that after 6 months of talk therapy, subjects had lower symptoms of depression. Remarkably, the same mental health stigma that underpins our higher education institutes is also underpinning the Zimbabwe culture and shows that their innovative model can work here in the United States. So our solution is fairly simple: talk therapy for students in ways students consume and prefer to use their resources, and that's on their cell phone and via technology. We have a 24/7 hotline and a 24/7 message and video chat service. But what makes us different, like the Zimbabwe model, is that students are greeted by a senior citizen and other volunteers. I always think about my grandfather when he was around. He always used to give me the best advice and get me out of the worst trouble. Who else is better to provide talk therapy than trained grandparents and senior citizens who have the time, patience, wisdom to guide their students through whatever they face. In addition to the friendly volunteer staff, we'll also include mental health professionals to answer calls as well and to get those calls routed to the appropriate authorities if needed. The benefits of this solution for universities and students, I call it the 3 S's. For schools, it reduces overhead compared to increasing their own mental health facilities and hiring staff. It also decreases their legal liability. My law hat on there for a moment. Second, in terms of students get the talk therapy they need so they can excel in school. With stronger mental health foundation, research shows that students will perform better in school and attend classes more often. As a result, this creates a windfall for society. We're providing engaging stimulation to the senior citizen population through their volunteer efforts while improving mental health among higher education institutes. Our goal here is not to change the mental health cycle, but rather to leverage technology, student consumer behavior, and the wisdom of volunteers. The proposition here is to provide talk therapy early in the process. That's the model on the bottom of the screen. And we can prevent crisis moments from occurring by using our services. This is a supplement to the on-campus treatment that most schools employ. The model and the market is fairly large. There's over 4,000 higher education institutes in the United States. That's about 14 million students in public schools and 5.1 million in private higher education institutes. According to recent studies, 13% of that student population has considered suicide. The need for this solution is dire. To make matters worse, there isn't really competitors or solution for this problem. Students are adverse to on-campus solutions due to the stigma. They don't want to be seen walking into the building. In-person professional services are great, but students lack the transportation to get to these folks. And in addition, there is some online applications. Talkspace is one of the bigger ones, but unfortunately its price model is way too costly for the student population, ranging from $25 to $80 a week. Financially, with a substantial amount of development in the beginning, we hopefully can break even within 5 years with a modest investment of 8 schools using our services. With that, I ask who would like to change and revolutionize the mental health industry in higher education institutes. I ask you consider taking on this project and join us. Students around the nation are waiting. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tyler. And we're going to kick this on with Alexandra going first.
Alrighty. Tyler, I think this is great because it supplements what's already going on in the school, which clearly isn't doing the job. And it's always been a question in my mind as to whether or not it's actually the university's responsibility, because it's so easy for people to slip through the cracks. So this is nice to have as a supplement to it. Things that I would have been interested to know about are where you're going to find the 400 grandmothers, and whether you've done something other than looking at the model from Zimbabwe, whether you've done anything here in the United States on a small scale that you might be able to talk about.
Thanks, Alexandra. Turn it over to Elizabeth.
This was fascinating. My first real job was running a kosher senior adult lunch program for 100 people who had been in Auschwitz. And they were so easy to talk to and so ready to engage. So I'm immediately, Tyler, drawn to this model. And I think you'll not have trouble finding the seniors. I wasn't able to unpack the budget, so my questions would be around that. I actually think it could be done for less money, but what do I know? I agree with Alexandra. It's a great complement to what is out there. It catches students where they are at their cell phones. And I completely agree that it's not attractive to go to health services on campuses. So I think this is a beautiful idea. I hope it flies. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Mindy?
Hi, Tyler. Great job. I think really a big problem. I mean, I know experiences with higher education that they just don't have the capacity to fill the need of the student body. So I agree. I think that there's a huge gap here and that this would be a very interesting way to go about it. I also think that having seniors available or other types of volunteers would be great. And I think a lot of students in college are kind of missing, they only have like the 18 to 22-year-olds. They miss the young kids, they miss the old people. So I think it would be very appealing. I do, I was kind of wondering about training for the volunteers, because obviously there would need to be points of pass off to university or something else. And also still how to market this to the students. So I'd be interested in understanding that a little bit more, because I really think it's a great idea, but there's still going to be some, I think, resistance potentially about using an app or sitting down with somebody you've never met before. So, but I think really a great idea, and I think you should continue to strive for this.
Thanks, Mindy. Evan?
Yeah, fantastic idea. I think you really got a bi-directional model here. You talked a little bit about the benefit for seniors as well. But there's a housing program that started out of Chicago that's garnering some interest across the country that solved some of the problems in higher ed, but also the social problems between newer students and seniors. So it's sort of collapsing a few things here, doing something similar, but higher ed has a problem with housing and the affordability of housing. And seniors and services surrounding seniors have a problem addressing loneliness and isolation, which exacerbate all other health conditions. So collapsing those two things, I think, or connecting those two things together is really brilliant in the mental health space. You've got me thinking about my Nana right now and how she's given me sage advice many years ago. I also wonder about her ability to leverage technology and what might need to be incorporated in the training there. I'm also thinking a little bit about some of the mental health outcomes that you'd be looking for. We know good mental health is good, and almost all things are mental health. Going for a walk in the woods is helpful for mental health, and seeing a clinician who has many years training and is reimbursable for services is also good for your mental health. So I'd be curious where you want to play in that space, what those outcomes will be, because it is a great supplement for sure, but really great idea. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Evan. Keith?
So love the idea. My sister, unfortunately recently passed, was a big mental health advocate and did a lot of work in this space, and was involved with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and started a program called Lifesavers University. So mental health and mental health awareness is near and dear to my heart for sure. Definitely, I think the thing that concerned me about the campus approach, one, it's totally necessary for sure, because kids are stressed out the wazoo. Schools don't do a great job of actually making sure that kids feel supported. There's a level of isolation even on a big campus like that. But I would have some questions. Just I know in my business, one of my businesses, that when we were targeting college campuses, schools are also very, very protective of the student body, right? And there are multiple layers, and so just make sure you give some thought about what the sales cycle is for getting to the end user, who is the student, or getting them to buy into that, because they're very, very protective of the students in general, and do not want to open them up to anything that could go awry for their liability. And so but I do think it's something that is needed. It's a no-brainer as far as need. It's just as far as execution. How do you get something like this into the market and get something that people feel comfortable with and engage with? Because even the existing apps that, as you mentioned, alluded to, getting the trust and getting this to be something that they're comfortable going to and speaking to, if they're not speaking to their friends or their family members. How do we get them to speak to someone so remote?
Thanks, Keith. Nat?
Hi, Tyler. Awesome. Great presentation. Talking bench. Wow. Brings me back to grandmother who never wanted to sit at all the benches in our garden, but we chatted anyway. It brings me back to a class I took, a CSR class in the Netherlands, which was having problems with depression with old people. And the cell phone company was using its employees to call the old people to relieve their depression and stresses. So we should connect offline. There could be a CSR opportunity for this too.
Thanks, Nat, and thanks again, Tyler. I'm now going to turn it over to Annalise Rolander, who's going to talk about funding models for independent journalism. Annalise?
Thank you. Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm so excited to speak with you all about my social enterprise Meatspace, whose mission is to support local journalism and local economies through a more socially conscious social media platform. But first, a little bit about myself. My name is Annalise Rolander. I'm a second-year Master of Public Administration student at Penn. I'm also a project manager at O3 World, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a digital product agency based in Fishtown. I specialize in bringing innovative digital solutions to life on behalf of our clients. That includes projects using AI and conversational interfaces. Prior to that, I have a writing and journalism background, and these days I'm particularly focused on how digital communities shape our democracy. So I'm seeking $250,000 to develop my prototype. I'm also seeking partnerships with media organizations, local businesses, musicians and artists, and other content creators. So the prototype is best understood in two parts. The first is the user-facing website. It uses personalization technology to collect and display the content that you as a user are most interested in, including news from responsible sources, original content, events in your neighborhoods, streaming media from local musicians, artists, and thinkers. To enable a comfortable digital space, we also envision having moderated discussion to prevent trolls and bots from taking over, as you see in other social media platforms. Premium features for paid accounts are also on our roadmap to increase our additional revenue sources. So the second part of the prototype is less visible to the end user. It is an advertising platform that engages small local businesses to build on their digital presence. Our goal is to redirect online commerce to analogous businesses in the user's neighborhood, the brick and mortar businesses more specifically. So we intend to do this by providing a low cost and frictionless way to get these very small businesses, sometimes only one employee, online in a way that doesn't take as much time and technological savvy as traditional models. So for the prototype, our audience for the website is socially conscious adults in the Philadelphia region. So you might be wondering why I find all of this necessary. So I believe that present forms of social media and digital advertising have untapped social potential. Basically, we're only seeing a very small percentage of the effects that we could be seeing, and a lot of the benefit is going to corporations that are already very large and powerful. So recent studies show that Americans are pretty wary of the current social media platforms. They don't trust them to properly police content, to safeguard their personal data. And yet there are more and more Americans and people around the world who receive their news through platforms like Facebook and Twitter. They're frustrated, but there are limited alternatives for digital spaces to congregate and receive information. Additionally, these users are increasingly aware of how their online behavior is captured, analyzed, and monetized by platforms and marketers. So consider how Google Ads works. Google collects consumer data to create digital ad marketplaces. You know, when you search for something in Google, like this dentist in Harrisburg, PA, well, the top results that you see here in green show up because the business paid for that result. They bid on AdWords, which I'm guessing are dentist in Harrisburg, PA. And so whoever you know, pays the most at that given moment gets the best placement. But this is kind of like a constantly fluctuating marketplace. Prices are constantly going up and down. So some businesses can only advertise for a short amount of time before they kind of tap out their budget. It's important to note that these businesses pay per click. So every time a person goes and clicks on that link, the business is paying for that action. Participating in this marketplace obviously requires resources and savvy that are outside the reach of the smallest businesses. Therefore, what we see is that the businesses with the deepest pockets get the best ad placements, and the sites with the largest readership command the highest ad revenue. And this kind of creates a cycle where, you know, you've heard the term clickbait, and that's because if sites are being paid by click, then you obviously want to engage users by making them want to click on very sensational types of stories. And I believe that that kind of creates a perverse relationship between advertising and journalism. So what I'm proposing is a new digital ecosystem. We want to offer a new model that can better support local communities by bringing all of these artists, these events, streaming local music, news and features, all within a locality-based website that also has moderated discussion, so that readers can engage with both the content and each other in a way that is that feels safe and protected and benefits society by elevating our civic discussion. So our hope is that after we develop this prototype, we'll be able to scale this model to cities across the country. With your support, we want to develop an all-new digital ecosystem that connects online users to their communities and their neighbors. We want to employ journalists and content creators who care about ethical reporting. And we feel that our novel advertising model can help bring economic relief to local communities by redirecting online commerce, which during COVID-19, you probably guess is through the roof these days. But we'd like to bring that activity back to local brick and mortar stores and provide them with an entry point to get in front of their fellow community members, specifically in Philadelphia. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'll take questions now. Thanks.
Thanks, Annalise. Keith, you want to kick us off?
Well, Annalise, I told you to think big, and you're thinking big. There's nothing like a big idea. So I appreciate you taking on the social ecosystems that exist today that really, you know, have minimal value for the most part when it comes to kind of relevant and truthful content, should I say. So, and also, you know, so I also sit on the board of the Enquirer, so I'm very familiar with, you know, the media ecosystem from that lens, and really interested in, you know, how do you, I see them struggle, or should I say us struggle to compete with some of the behemoths, like, you know, the Facebooks and Twitters and others. How would you position yourself to make sure that you can get the traction that you need? What's the strategy as far as really the go-to-market?
So Annalise, we'll let you answer that question to either Keith himself or in the chat box, but let me turn it over to Elizabeth.
We're all thirsty for this product, so thank you for thinking big on this. You brought me in with the word journalism, and I would have liked to have heard just a little bit more on that, including what you mean by ethical reporting, but that's what we're all missing and all craving. I love that this is about local living economies, from the businesses to the community to the journalists. And I think with the right marketing, you could bring us in. So thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Mindy?
Thank you. That was a really compelling presentation. I'm not sure I have a whole lot to add. I agree with what Elizabeth just said about, you know, would have been, I would have liked for myself to hear just a little bit more about, you know, the ethical journalism and that piece of it. But I think that this is something that's really needed, and good luck to you.
Thanks, Mindy. Evan?
It was a rock solid presentation. I think every question that came up on one slide was answered with the next slide. Very intuitive. And it's incredibly prescient right now. There's a lot of question around how do we drive business to small businesses. We're going to continue to see smaller businesses really struggle in this space. So the timing is absolutely right. The only question I did have was a little bit more about the scalability and how. I'm not a marketing expert by any means, living in the health space, but would love to know a little bit more about the how of the scalability.
Thanks, Evan. Nat?
Great idea. Love it. I worked at WHY for 5 years, so I know where you're coming from when they launched Newsworks and how difficult it was trying to get into that market. And they were like, who are you? You're Newsworks or you WHYY? What's going on here? But how to connect those small businesses. Every door I beat on there, like, get out of here. We're not going to get any from your online anything. So it's similar to the patch. You know how AOL tried to launch that whole scenario with the patch? They're dwindling, they're surviving, but I also agree with Elizabeth's comments, and well done, thank you.
Thanks, Nat. And Alexandra?
I too think that there's a great need for having ethical reporting. I just wonder how you're going to police that, how you're going to have a moderated discussion without somebody hijacking it, and who's the moderator. And it's anyway, that was the one thing that I had a question about.
Okay, thanks, Alexandra, and again, thanks, Annalise, for the presentation. I'm now going to turn it over to Marina Della Puta Johnson, who's going to talk about food and access in school hubs and COVID-19 as an opportunity for social innovation.
Thank you, and let me see if I can get to my, oops, I'm having a problem a moment with going, oh, here we go. So I want to thank Nick for inviting me to share my ideas with such a great group of inspirational people. What I'm going to present on is a recommendation for the creation of food and health access school hubs taking COVID-19 as an opportunity for social innovation. So my immediate goal today is to enlist the help of an organization, Independence Blue Cross, Bill Abundance, to propose the creation of and to work with a state government task force that I envision led by Dr. Rachel Levine and Pedro Rivera, the Secretary of Health and Education for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to create and implement FASH, Food and Health Access School Hubs. Access to food and health care, we've known they are determinant factors in social development and improvement, because better food and health translate into better educational outcomes, and in the end, into a better society. And the US has created over the last 150 years several programs of hygiene and food assistance in public schools that have carried the nation through several crises, including the Depression, the post-war years. The present crisis is COVID-19, which has caused school closings, business closings, resulting in loss of access to food and health services for a large portion of the population. If we look at the numbers, we really understand the dire need. The National School Lunch Program served over 37 million American children while schools were open in the first 3 months of 2020. And there are now about 2 million new unemployment benefit claims that have been filed solely in Pennsylvania for between March 15 and May 27, yesterday. Yesterday, we also passed the 100,000 mark for deaths from COVID. Even if many more are recovering, have recovered, those are actually the people we need to focus on. And we have to ask ourselves how many will be left with long-term health problems as aftermath of COVID-19, even children, because now we know that it affects children much more seriously than previously expected. So my solution would be the creation of food and health access school hubs, using children's enrollment in public schools to identify family in need and provide for these families food and healthcare access. And this can be done regardless of how instruction will start up again in the fall. The services provided at FASH would be food packages for the whole family through a combination of the National School Lunch Program and SNAP, but also in collaboration with local food banks, food distributors, and foundations, and also basic health services for students and their families based on the retail clinic model, in collaboration with local healthcare providers and foundations, educational and health foundations, but also Comcast, for example, which could assist with creating telemedicine platforms and providing hardware and internet services. When we think about this kind of programs, we certainly have privacy and security concerns that must be addressed. And we can therefore think about separate points of entry, about requiring specially issued school IDs for access to services. We can provide services at different times than outside of school hours, and offer telemedicine services. My recommendation in summary would be identify communities and schools to implement pilot FASH, fund from existing federal, state, municipal programs and private organizations, collaborate with local food banks and food distributors, healthcare providers and foundations, and simplify the application process and access to food and health services so that we can guarantee the well-being of children, their families, and really of the whole Commonwealth. So thank you for your attention. I look forward to your questions, and I can be reached also at my email, johnston@sas.upenn.edu.
Thanks, Marina. And so we'll turn it over to Evan.
Marina, great presentation. Great big thinking too. You're trying to take on some really big systems here, and the need is great right now. And I think our current environment is just underscoring the importance of access to food and obviously healthcare. There are a lot of players in this space right now, so the sandbox is full. I wish you the best of luck. It's a great presentation, great idea. Just got to convince all those parties.
Thanks, Evan. Elizabeth?
Boy, it's a sad state of affairs when the government isn't meeting this need, but kids obviously need to come first and they need food. I would love to see your program. I mean, you're already taking on so much, but I'd love to see it connect with local farmers and start to undo some of the systems that we have now that are working. Judy Wicks has a great new organization called All Together Now Pennsylvania, where she's working on the whole supply chain from farmer to consumer, and just start to make new systems that are local and work for all. So thank you for taking on such a huge project.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Mindy?
Thank you, Marina. This speaks to me very deeply, because while we don't have at the foundation an explicit priority of basic needs, there's also always been the acknowledgement at the foundation that if basic needs are not met for children and youth, we cannot expect them to develop into responsible, engaged members of their communities. And so your graphic showing sort of the better education outcomes is sort of following this type of program, I think is exactly right. I think that the challenge is it's such a big idea, and it's an important idea, but it is so big. And it's true systems change, and it really will take the pulling together of so many pieces. I don't know if you've been in touch with Donna Cooper at PCCY, but if you haven't, she's probably would be a good person for you to reach out and talk to. She's often thinking about real systems change as well.
Thanks, Mindy. Nat?
Amazing presentation. The need is definitely there. Just going through the board meeting and seeing all the funders for food. It was amazing to see. Interesting, identifying through school records. Will the city provide that info and all that fun stuff? That's a great idea. I say go for it. And I agree with Mindy, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Nat. Alexandra?
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. It's something that, although Valentine doesn't fund direct services, it's something that we do talk about, food security. And especially in the COVID-19, when so many families were cut off. Just looking at the lines of people waiting for food, 5 hours, it's shocking and saddening. Anyway, I think it's a great project. It's a huge thing you're undertaking, and it would be great if you got some of those big corporations to partner with you.
Thank you, Alexandra. And Keith?
I can go next. So definitely, unfortunately, really necessary. And as I said earlier, I think it will continue to increase the issues around food insecurity. It is going to be the logistical challenge and how do you carve out your role in the ecosystem with a bunch of players, right? So I'm thinking through that partnership model and, thinking through kind of what the scale look like for you, because there are lots of players and maybe helping them to work. And I believe your goal is to make sure that they work more efficiently and collaboratively together. And so just really streamlining what your role would be in the ecosystem.
Great. Well, thank you, Keith, and thanks, Marina, again for presenting. So we have one last presentation. We're running a little bit behind, but hopefully everybody can stay with us. So let me turn it over to Lori Schuster from Thrill Like a Woman, who's going to talk about increasing the capacity and changing the trajectory of institutions to provide a voice to underrepresented communities. Lori?
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for your time today and for your patience to wait for me. My name is Lori Schuster. I'm the CEO and founder of Thrill Like a Woman Social Impact Services. I'm very excited for this to be our first touch point to build relationships and engage foundations to collaborate to build better nonprofits. The inspiration for Thrill Like a Woman came when I was a nonprofit professional, and then I went to the social responsibility side. I worked with vulnerable communities and underrepresented communities, and I would often hear these qualifier statements. I'm just serving immigrants. I'm only working with underserved populations. I'm just working for food insecure families. I'm simply a mom working for people with disabilities. The idea for Thrill Like a Woman came to increase trajectory through empowerment and magnifying voices through resources. So the first thing that Thrill Like a Woman does is we provide free needs assessments to underserved communities to ensure that they're not paying out of pockets for duplications of services or ideas that maybe are not nonprofits or better served as programs or maybe designated advised funds. But we do not want people bleeding or having really high burn rates to become innovators. Thrill Like a Woman works on a sliding scale within a project rate to make sure that we work on an inline item budget for things like marketing, cause marketing, and we become embedded in your organization to ensure that we understand to build capacity and become one of your organization's teammates. One of my favorite statements was that we work from ideation to implementation to improvement to help your organization increase impact. How do we go about doing this? We start by working from an impact assessment model. And that's setting apart 4 or 5 really key we priorities that we can implement with you. And we create a tactical plan. We work tactically versus strategically because we found that working with small to mid-sized nonprofits, working 5 years out is really too long. And we implement them with you, understanding your environment, and we keep reviewing it over and over again, understanding your leadership, the environment, and adjusting it. We like to say that social impact is your product. What does that mean? If you're a soup kitchen, you really need to understand metrics for success. That means how many meals are you serving? How many people are you serving? How are you telling that story, metrics-wise, and communicating that story to your target audience and to the people you serve? If you're a business, how are you telling that story based on your product? And how are you telling that story to the community? We serve one community at a time, one neighbor at a time. And we're constantly reassessing and replanning. We like to say that, one of my board members said this, we don't create a generic map and hand it off and say, here, you do this. We create a map for the organization based on the needs, based on the environment, and based on the checkpoints. We create several checkpoints and we go through it and we plant that flag with you. And one of the organizations that we worked with, Pegasus Therapeutic Riding, they said that they hired us to do the same event that they do every year. But once we became part of their team and became embedded in the organization, we started to notice all these other things, like they needed new board members, they needed committee members, they needed a whole structure. And they started to stop calling themselves the best kept secret. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. And they started to move themselves forward. And after they worked with us, they called it a transformative experience. Our target market is underrepresented communities, mostly mid-sized organizations, although we do work with smaller organizations for board retreats and larger organizations for board retreats and nonprofit events. We work on the for-profit side doing cause marketing, events, and social impact projects. I'd like to introduce you to the Thrill Like a Woman team. Here's us at the Social Innovation Awards, and we're really excited to build community with you. We're excited about our strategic partner work and our outreach to the community to educate and build better nonprofits. Our ask today is to start to collaborate more with foundations to build better nonprofits and to build community with you to ensure that your objectives are met. thank you for your time today. Really excited to hear some of your feedback and listen to ways that we can support each other.
Thanks, Lori. We'll start off with Elizabeth.
First of all, I love the name of your business.
Thank you.
It captivated me the first time I heard it a number of months ago, and it just carries a lot of weight. I trust you know Morgan Bergman at Milk.
Yeah.
It seems like what you're doing could benefit from the apps that she's using. Just for your presentation, I had a little bit of trouble at the beginning, sort of understanding what you meant by communities before you drilled down to nonprofits and then potentially for-profits. So it just took me a little bit of time to get my head around what you're doing. I would have thought before you showed me your partners that most nonprofits don't think they can afford your services, but clearly you've proved otherwise. So that might have helped me to see that up front, to have confidence in you, but it looks great and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Mindy?
Thanks, Lori. Really great presentation. Enjoyed it tremendously. So I think the only thing I would have said that could have been timely is a more direct link to our current situation and the pandemic and the incredible need that the nonprofit community has to be adapting to what's happened and how that will affect their planning. And so I think it's even a bigger opportunity for you. So I think that this would have been a perfect point to kind of hammer that home. So that's it. That's the only feedback I had. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mindy. Nat?
Awesome presentation. I see the demand and need for it all the time. Reassess, overhaul the whole thing, try to figure out where we need to go, impacts and mission, and love the 5-year outlook. Definitely no one ever does that. So thank you. Might be calling you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nat. Alexandra?
Laurie, thank you for that. The Valentine Foundation is interested, we do it through our leadership training for women working in nonprofits, but oftentimes the applications that come to us also talk about organizational issues and training in organizations. And so I'm right there with you that this is so critical for nonprofits. It's the thing that when they're doing their budget, they don't budget for, because it's the first thing that ends up on the cutting room floor. So I think to make it affordable to nonprofits, particularly now that they're going to have to be shuffling around what they're doing and reprioritizing. So I think this is very timely.
Thanks, Alex.
I think you threw it to me, Nick, but also think this makes a ton of sense. I know nonprofits need this for sure, specifically to better tell their story. I'm really interested in, how you use data to help them better tell their story to foundations. So kudos.
Thanks, Keith. And Evan?
Lori, great presentation. The need is there. Certainly part of what we've done at the Independence Blue Cross Foundation as part of our community innovation program is to convene our nonprofits and provide programming and learning opportunities for them to do exactly these sorts of things. Smart of you also to get in front of foundations and the philanthropists who are connecting with those nonprofits. The need is there for sure, and I could see you being incredibly successful in this space. So best of luck.
Thank you. We've met with your innovation center. And we've also, they're setting up, before COVID, they were setting up a meeting with your foundation. And we also have an event scheduled with Morgan Berman coming up in June. So we're getting out there.
Great. Glad to hear it.
So thanks, Lori. So this concludes our event. I just wanted to thank our panelists. Thank you, Keith, for presenting, and Nat, Alexandra, Elizabeth, Mindy, and Evan. Thanks for your expertise and your time. And a special thanks to our presenters who did a lot of preparation in putting this stuff together. It takes a lot of time to get it down to 5 minutes, as I learned. So Mary Beth, Megan, Tyler, Annalise, Marina, and Lori, thank you so much. You know, we've never done a virtual event, but we hope we will reach out back to our panelists and presenters, and hopefully you'll give us some thoughts for future events and how we can keep this movement going. Now I'm going to turn it over just to Susan to close. Susan is a member of the Social Innovations Partners, and she supports weaving an entrepreneur mindset into early education alongside teaching the tech skills of future leaders, which will require to continue to solve our region's societal issues. So Susan Fink.
Thanks, Nick. I just want to say, from starting to scaling and fostering growth in our region, we need every tool at our disposal to drive employment and economic growth to continue to address our pressing social challenges. Keith, you mentioned earlier that it was time to start placing big bets, is what you said. And Social Innovations is here to inspire you to dream. And we'll help you innovate using our resources to launch and grow your ideas. We're excited to be moving Social Innovations into its next generation. And we'll be supporting 3 new initiatives focusing on collaborations and engagement of local government, corporations, grant makers, and individuals in the important system changes we've all been discussing, and how Social Innovations will impact our region. We're also going to be bringing local nonprofits through the vetting process so that the most viable new ideas and the changes approach to our region's issues will be heard and addressed, much like we saw today. And we'll specifically be focusing on what makes impact on current missions and their programs. Thank you so much. Having worked with the innovators who you heard today, it's been my pleasure. And thank you to the foundations for listening through and providing really invaluable help and guidance as we move into the next phase of all of our missions. Be well and healthy.
Yeah, enjoy your evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.